Superman, the movie. The one that started it all. The trendsetter. The alpha and omega. Well, not the omega, because I think that's the end. It's definitely the alpha, though. Now that I think about it, it's kind of sacrilegious to review a movie like Superman, the movie, and not have my Superman cape. There's just something that feels wrong about it, so if you'll excuse me. That is so much better. Yes, Superman cape. Alright, now I'm ready to begin. For anybody that's been following my channel, you know that I have been preparing to do a series on Superman for a while now, leading up to Superman's big return in Justice League. If you haven't heard, Justice League, Superman is going to be coming back from the dead. He passed away in Batman v Superman, Doomsday, that dick. Getting up to Justice League, I am reviewing a lot of the other Superman movies and animated films that have come out beforehand. And so, I wanted to start with Superman the movie, because this movie does have a very special place in my heart from when I was a kid and I first saw this thing. Obviously, the movie came out before I was born. It came out in 1978, before superhero movies were really considered a thing, like before they were taken seriously on the mainstream. I've talked to a lot of other people that were born around that time or who grew up around that time or who watched that film growing up, and a lot of people have told me that superhero movies were kind of just looked at as this silly little thing for kids. Like, they weren't really taken seriously. They weren't looked at. They were just kind of like, oh, comic books, they're, you know, whatever. It's a floozy, it's a flazzy, it's a woozy, it's a wazzy, it's a whoo, fairy dust, you know, whatever. Superman the movie was like the first real legit movie where Hollywood kind of had to go, oh, wait, you mean those things can actually be good? We can actually take them serious? We can actually make a great film and have it be about a superhero? Huh. Interesting concept. It was nominated for 3 Oscars. I believe it won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects because at that time, nobody could have believed that you could visually represent a man flying on screen and have it actually look good. But in this movie, as the tag said on the poster, you'll believe that a man can fly. And in the movie, they did a great job of making you believe that a man can fly. The movie was excellently cast, too. This has such a great cast. Obviously, the iconic Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando, who doesn't like Marlon Brando, obviously from The Godfather and movies like that. He plays Jor-El in this movie. He is Superman's father in this movie. Everyone else did a great job too. I think Glenn Ford is his name. He plays Jonathan Kent. Jonathan Kent, who instills a lot of life lessons in a young Clark Kent as he's growing and developing on his journey to become Superman. Jackie Cooper is Perry. Perry, you know, his boss from the Daily Planet. He was great in this movie. I mean, honestly, he was funny. He was very hot-tempered. He's got a certain spark to him. You really do feel like most of the cast that filled out this movie performed the best that they absolutely could in the role that they were assigned to do. Margot Kidder as Lois Lane. I mean, you've got Ned Beatty as Otis. He plays one of Lex Luthor's henchmen in this movie, and Otis is like the perfect idiot for a movie like this. Like, a movie like this, you need a certain amount of fun and camp. Otis is that camp. He is that perfect idiot, perfectly suited for this story. Obviously, the big dog, the big one that tops them all is Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve and his portrayal of Superman has gone down in annals as one of the most iconic performances ever, like of any movie of any genre. You watch Christopher Reeve in this movie, it's hard to argue that. For the Superman of that time, the spirit of Superman, the charisma, the charm, the heroics, he's like a big, huge, gentle giant. I don't know if he's my favorite, actually. Like, Henry Cavill came along a few years ago, and it kind of shook the boundaries of everything that I wanted to see in a Superman movie, so I'm not entirely sure if it's my favorite. It was my favorite before Henry Cavill. While Henry Cavill, I think, has had better films and more of my favorite films than the Christopher Reeve movies, I think it's easy to say that Christopher Reeve still has the best overall portrayal of Superman and Clark Kent. Is the one thing throughout any of the Superman movies, and there were 4 Superman films that were made back then, he's the one thing that's like, okay, even if the movie is shit, Christopher Reeve was awesome in. The movie's kind of broken down into like 2 different parts. Like, the first half of the movie deals with the destruction of Krypton, and then Superman coming to Earth, Superman growing up with Jonathan and Ma Kent, and then Superman losing his father, basically his adoptive father, and then him figuring out that Jor-El is his father, Fortress of Solitude. The second half of the film is about him being Superman, like him in the costume saving people, and about some plot involving Lex Luthor and a bunch of land. There is also a kind of cool little setup or reference to the second film in this franchise. In the first few minutes, we see that Jor-El and the Council of Krypton is sentencing these 3 evil douchebags to the Phantom Zone or whatever. Yeah, you got Zod, you got Nan, and you got the other chick with the creepy eyes. They're all being sentenced for crimes that they committed, and you're not going to see them the rest of this movie, but just stay tuned. I might talk about them in a future film. First, and some of the negatives in this movie, it can't be helped. Like, okay, the special effects and the green screen, Yeah, it was a different time, people. Obviously, the special effects in green screen are a little bit dated. You understand that. You get that. You could watch this movie and you could just walk away going, yeah, well, it doesn't look as good compared to some of the movies of today. Do you know what that is? That's a nitpick. That's like me saying, man, there wasn't a whole lot of good acting in that porn I just watched. Somebody should slap me and be like, hey, dude, it's porn. There's not supposed to be great acting. What are you talking to? Just shut up. The same thing for the special effects in this movie. So you gotta say that with kind of like a caveat or an asterisk. Obviously, this movie does have a fair bit of camp and corny humor and stuff like that, and for some people it might turn them off, but for me personally, as a kid, when I first saw this movie, like in the early 2000s, it was endearing to me, and I actually had quite a bit of fun at the campier parts of this film. I think my only two legit issues, like the two legit issues that I can't get past with this movie, is I do wish that they had spent more time developing Superman as he's becoming Superman. What basically happens is they show him as a teenager, they show Jonathan Kent dying, which I do think is a nice touch because it shows that Superman is really powerful as he is. He can't save everybody. He can't stop regular things like heart attacks. After Jonathan Kent dies, he goes on this journey. He finds the Fortress of Solitude. He meets Jor-El. Jor-El starts telling him about his destiny and about his powers. Then the movie just like skips ahead 12 years, and the next time you see Superman, he's Superman. Like, he's already in the suit and he flies for the first time, and you're kind of like, oh, it would have been nice to see some of those 12 years. Instead, they just kind of montage through it, and you feel like the development for him wasn't really there. The issue I have with this movie is Lex Luthor. He's kind of, look, Gene Hackman was great for this movie. He was the perfect amount of silly, over-the-top, campy villain. Perfect for a movie that came out in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm just saying, as a villain, as a character, his character is kind of thin. There's really nothing to him other than the fact that he wants land. Like, he values land above everything else, and he's kind of jealous of Superman, and so that's pretty much it. He finds out about kryptonite in such a silly, easy button type of way. Like, it didn't really make sense when I saw it back then. It doesn't really make sense now that I see it through adult eyes. There are so many iconic and memorable moments in this movie. I mean, obviously, we have the big rescue of Superman and Lois Lane when he first saves Lois Lane for the first time. I mean, who doesn't remember that? It has one of the most iconic moments of any Superman film or TV show or animation ever.
What the hell's that?
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
Obviously, you have that great moment where Superman tracks down Lex Luthor and they have a whole bunch of obstacles and traps set up for him, and he just kind of walks through it because nothing can really hurt him. All that stuff is really awesome. But then once he gets to Lex Luthor and he gets exposed to kryptonite for the first time, and you find out, oh, well, wait, Superman does have a weakness. See the iconic moment at the end where Lois Lane dies and then he gets angry. And that's actually some really powerful acting on Christopher Reeve's part right there. You can definitely feel the emotion seeping out of him on that part. And then he basically disobeys his father. His father was like, hey, you can't interfere in human affairs. You can't change history. Superman goes, yeah, screw that. I want to bang Margot Kidder. So he flies up and he basically spins back the axis of the world or something. And he flies so fast that he reverses time and he stops her from dying. Which, I mean, yes, it's stupid. It doesn't make a ton of sense. But again, we're dealing with a movie that deals with a man in red and blue tights who can fly, who is invulnerable, and you just kind of have to accept things like that are gonna happen. The first time that Superman and Lois Lane meet in this movie, like, not the first time, like when he saves her life. I'm talking about the first time they get to have, like, an open conversation where she writes that article, I Spent the Night with Superman, where they get to fly. That scene probably should be in a PG-13 movie. Have you guys heard that scene? Have you guys listened to, you know, Superman going, oh, well, your underwear is pink, because she asks him what color are my underwear? I'm like, what is this rated? Is this rated PG? No way is this rated PG. No way. Has to be touched on, last but not least, is the score. The score for this movie is fucking brilliant. It is one of the best musical scores composed ever in the history of musical cinema. It is one of the best scores that I have ever heard. John Williams, you deserve that and a whole bunch more. He created arguably the most iconic Superman theme ever. Like, anybody that hears that music immediately knows, oh, that's Superman. Like, he perfectly captured the spirit and the essence of Superman. It's kind of euphoric and adventurous, and it's just kind of dutiful, and it's like, yeah, it almost sounds like an American theme, and I don't know what it is about that musical score, but it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. The special effects are a bit dated. Luthor as a character is a bit thinly developed, and they do kind of montage through some of the important parts of Superman's development. But if you can look past all of that, which I can, this movie is a classic. Without this movie, comic book films may not have evolved to the point where they are today. This is really the first comic book film to be taken seriously as a movie. And as a result, because of its importance in history and because of the impact that it had on me as a kid, there's no way that this is not getting my highest rate. Superman the movie? Superman Prime. You heard it here first. Guys, those are my thoughts on Superman the movie. Obviously, I'm assuming that most of you have seen or at least heard of this movie. So go ahead and list to me down below what your favorite moment of Superman the movie is. A moment that I mentioned, maybe a moment that I didn't mention. Let me know down below. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.